What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Ango Show. Today, we have a big one for you. We got a lot of things to discuss. Don't forget, I'm giving away this championship belt at 100K. Once I hit 100,000 subscribers, we're going to do a live stream. It's going to be massive giveaways, prizes, whole bunch of stuff going down. So subscribe now. All right, the very first topic that I want to discuss today is, in fact, Bryan Danielson, because there was an injury that occurred when he was involved in this incredible tag team match with Claudio against Okada and Orange Cassidy. That took place on AEW Dynamite. He got injured. Everybody thought, oh my God, AEW is doing a work. And obviously, it could make a lot of sense that people would think it's a work because typically, in pro wrestling, it's quite believable, especially for these types of things. But that actually doesn't appear to be the case. Bryan Danielson is, in fact, injured. It was confirmed by the commentary team on AEW Collision, and it sounds like it's going to require some surgery. He broke his orbital bone, and it sounds like Bryan Danielson will be out for a little bit longer. There is this general belief that perhaps he could be out for the rest of the year, maybe sooner, maybe even later. Obviously, Bryan Danielson, we know his time in AEW is not going to be lasting that much longer as a full-time performer. And it kind of sucks when you see injuries like this. It kind of sucks when you see that Bryan Danielson this year has had a string of bad luck. And, realistically, man, I know a lot of people are going to talk about AEW's in-ring style. And obviously, Jon Moxley just recently talking about the concussion protocol across the board. He wants to see some change in the industry. I've talked about this too many times on the channel, but with pro wrestling, man, you could try to be as careful as you want, but shit happens, right? Accidents happen. And obviously, yeah, AEW has a different work style than WWE, but you still see injuries across WWE. So it's not something where you could just point fingers at AEW and blame them for stuff. But at the same time, too, it's just unfortunate because it's Bryan Danielson. And, well, it's obviously unfortunate regardless of who it happens to. But Bryan Danielson, in this case, again, it just kind of seems like a string of bad luck since he's been in AEW. He's had injuries here and there. And look, the reality is that Bryan Danielson will not be doing this for that much longer. Obviously, being injured and being taken off TV and stuff like that, it sucks, And I don't know if AEW will get to the point that they put the World Championship on Bryan Danielson, but before he retires as a full-time performer for AEW, I would at least like to see that happen. Obviously, the trick to that is, it gets a little bit tricky when you factor in injuries and stuff, but when you look at Bryan Danielson, I feel like him as a world champion could be a really good business move for AEW. We'll see what would actually happen, if that were the case, but I just feel like it makes a lot of sense for him to kind of hold the belt for a little bit and then drop it to another emerging star, which obviously we're going to be talking about MJF in a little bit, but hopefully Bryan Danielson heals up soon, and hopefully he could come back ready to go, and hopefully no more injuries. I want to turn our attention to a AEW return, Reba, you guys remember her. She was taken off television. We made a video on this several months ago with her just basically being removed. The reason why she was removed was because she works as a heel. Britt Baker was getting over as a babyface. That was the reason for it. Now Sean Ross Sapp has come out, and he reported in a new Q&A that there have been discussions about bringing Rebel back to television. However, there were no additional details given. And this is interesting, right? Because Rebel is not she has a little bit of wrestling background, but through her time in TNA and then obviously her time in AEW, she's always been a character. She's a character, and she's a good one. I look at the AEW women's division. I think it's a little bit inconsistent. I think that there's things that they do well. There's things that they don't do well with. But the women's division just kind of feels like it's in limbo right now. And I'm not necessarily sure as to why. Maybe it's just because there's not that many stories surrounding the women's division. And then in addition to that, the lead story isn't the one that is necessarily the most powerful story. But at the same time, too, I think part of that is by not having so many women, actually competing. And listen, guys, I was always a big critic of the power rankings, right? But it's not that power rankings don't work. It's that AEW eventually didn't care about power rankings. But when you look at the original beginning of AEW and the power rankings that they did, it did, at least in the beginning, it was used to justify matches that were happening on TV or storylines or, championship matches or whatever the case may be. So I think ultimately, if I were AEW, I would try to get back into that realm. You don't necessarily have to bring the power rankings back, but like building a ladder of talent that are like any one of them can compete. And then what I would do is have Rebel on TV as some sort of figurehead, maybe like a manager for Britt Baker. That could always work. But maybe some sort of like personnel within the women's division, right? If there's two people I'm looking at, it's Maria Kanellis or Rebel, because I feel like they could both fit the role. In ROH, Stokely Hathaway is kind of like him and Jerry Lynn are kind of like on the board of commission or whatever for ROH. I wouldn't be opposed to AEW doing something like that and then having Maria Kanellis or Rebel kind of assume that position to try and like create some matches or storylines within the women's division. I don't know. It's a random idea, but they don't have power rankings. Not a lot of things are happening on TV for the women's division. The stuff that is happening on TV, I mean, it's inconsistent. It's not bad. It's just inconsistent. And I think like Tony Storm is doing a hell of a job, but there's not a real strong story to carry this women's division forward right now. They need to fix that. Maybe you can do that with Maria or Rebel coming in as kind of like an authority board member or something like that for the women's division. And our final topic of today's video is MJF. Guys, he dropped an incredible promo after AEW Collision. Very fantastic match with Kenny Omega. And it's so crazy, by the way, to see MJF. We know that MJF is a great wrestler, but he doesn't always show it in AEW because he has always been a little bit more character-centric. But we know MJF is good. So when MJF has these really, really good matches, some people tend to like forget that, right? They don't necessarily realize how good he actually is. So he has this banger of a match with Kenny Omega. Then essentially what happens is he cuts this promo. He says, without Kenny Omega, without the Young Bucks, without Cody, and without Tony Khan, he also calls Tony Khan an effing mark. He basically goes on to say that AEW doesn't exist. And if AEW doesn't exist, therefore him being the world champion also does not exist. He says, I still don't know what I'm going to do for the bidding war of 2024, but what I do know is that when I get the opportunity to wrestle the best bout machine, Kenny Omega, it tends to sway my opinion a little bit. Kenny Omega then took the mic, also put over MJF. And guys, this is one of the crazy things, right? Honestly, I've speculated in the past that I don't believe MJF is technically a free agent. I don't believe MJF will be a free agent for 2024. I think a lot of people are probably leaning towards that as well. And as more time has gone on, you've actually seen less of MJF making WWE references or the bidding war of 2024. It became a thing that was always on TV, always being discussed. It was always a thing for heat, and obviously they were great promos. But now as time has gone on, you see less and less of it. And I don't know, just I hear this promo, I see this promo, and I still am sticking to my gut feeling that MJF, it's always been part of the plan for him to stay with AEW, and there's no plan for him to leave. And I think this is an AEW type of thing where not only they're trying to work the audience, but work the people in the back, work the WWE, make people think that MJF is potentially going to be a free agent, so that way when it gets revealed, kayfabe-wise, right, it gets revealed that he re-signed with the company, it just makes it look like WWE couldn't land the top free agent, which obviously puts a lot of stock in MJF, and it makes Tony Khan have to pay a lot of money for MJF, right, because at the end of the day, MJF is commanding a lot of attention with what he's doing. Now, with that being said, it's going to be interesting to watch this video back in 3-4 months when, we get into January and February and we see what he does outside of the bidding war of 2024. In my heart, in my mind, I feel like he's with this company. And, that's why I put the question mark in the title. Did he re-sign with the company? Do you guys think he re-signed with the company? I don't know. It's going to be really crazy to find out. What else is crazy? I'm giving away this championship belt at $100K.